Good morning from California, and good afternoon and good evening to the rest of you. I'm Stas Margaronis, president of the Propeller Club of Northern California, and this is the Inland and Great Lakes Shipping Panel. And I am introducing Amy Andrus, executive director of the Inland Rivers, Ports, and Terminals. Amy is the executive director, and she is also the author of the Coastal and Inland Ports and Terminals and Commerce Act, which I hope she will discuss. Amy is also a member of the board of directors of the International Association of Marine Port Executives. More importantly, from our discussion yesterday about congestion, inland ports are taking an increasingly more important role as a means of maritime and container transportation. And we will be hearing more about that from our panelists. Amy, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the International Propeller Club Convention.
Well, thank you so much, Stas. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having us. I'm excited for this panel today. I'm excited to bring some alternative supply chain solutions to the group that include the inland waterways, the inland river transportation system, and the Great Lakes. I just want to very briefly tell you about Inland Rivers, Ports, and Terminals. Our association is a national association for port and terminal professionals. We provide some resources in order for them to increase their business so that we can offer solutions. Most of our inland port and terminals are very small in staff size, and so they do rely on their associations at time for whether it be education resources, legislation. We offer different initiatives, including container on barge initiatives. Container on barge, it's not a new concept. What we are seeing on the river system is that it's becoming more popular as an alternative to your current congestion issues that you might have on the West Coast. If we were to have our ocean carriers call on the Gulf Coast or even the Great Lakes, we can then transload those containers and ship those down the river system into the heartland of the country, where those containers can then disperse throughout that supply chain network. I find it most interesting with the congestion that is happening on the West Coast, and we kind of saw a little bit of this back in 2014 when they had the labor strike going on the West Coast. At the same time, it seemed there was some rate increases and rate hikes on the East Coast. And at that time too, the conversation kind of shifted into shippers wanting an alternative to their supply chain. So at that time, container on barge did come to the forefront of the conversation. I'm super proud of the IRPT members that have explored offering container on barge into their current portfolios. I will say that Memphis, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and I believe maybe even St. Louis, hopefully one of our panelists will speak on that today, have offered container on barge as a solution to that congestion that we saw in 2014. So like I said, we currently do have container on barge shipping on the Mississippi River. And so we are very proud of our partners and our members that have entered into that type of supply chain. We offer solutions and resources to our members who are, wanting to get into container on barge, as far as finding suppliers and service providers that may, offer, whether it's the attachments, the handling equipment, maybe it's security, as far as, securing those containers, offloading and waiting on port property, etc. So that's a little bit about our association. As far as the river system and what we are seeing, yes, the IRPT did write a bill back in 2019. We did get it passed in 2020. What the bill did, it was essentially set aside a special federal funding through the Port Infrastructure Development Program, the PIDP, out of the Department of Transportation, specifically for smaller ports and inland ports and terminals. What we were seeing is a lot of our members who wanted to get into container on barge or even other types of shipping, they just needed small amounts of capital investments, not these major like $20 million kind of grants. And the opportunities for funding that were out there were for these major and massive projects. So those members of IRPT and smaller ports that aren't members, we're having a hard time, applying for those grant funds and competing against the larger ports, the LA Long Beach and New York, New Jersey. And so by getting the bill passed, we were able to set aside $41 million through the Department of Transportation, where these ports can apply for that special set aside funding. It's unclear just yet how much has been applied for. We are expecting an over application amount or rate, given that it's the first year. And I think that will show us, and it will give us an indication into the future what our infrastructure funding needs might be on a smaller scale, including the inland river system. And again, we're not talking about the 20, 25 million or $50 million capital investments. And speaking of capital investments, I also want to just express my gratitude and my pride for our members. After 2019, what we saw were devastating floods on 3 major river systems at the same time. I know my heart broke for a lot of our members whose facilities were just inundated with those floodwaters. That was a historic year for us. It was a historic year for the Army Corps of Engineers, who, of course, wanted to get back in there to operate and maintain our river system. But the great news is that we did overcome. We have recovered. Our river system is open for business, and we're operating currently at under capacity. So what that means is we can handle that additional cargo that may be coming to the river system as an alternative supply chain solution to our Walmarts, our Costco's, etc. So I hope all of that makes sense. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have, after our panelists, give a great presentation. And so speaking of our panelists, I just want to say, Steve Fisher, Mark Wright, and Bill Stallman, this is a really great group of fine gentlemen. When we talk about, expertise on the marine transportation system that includes the river system and the Great Lakes, Steve, Mark, and Bill are the guys that you want to talk to. Not only are they engaged in everyday business and opportunities with their members and who they represent, but they're right there on the ground, kind of boots on the ground. So with that, I do want to introduce Steve Fisher to you. And I'll kind of go through who our panelists are today, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Fisher. But Steve Fisher is the executive director of the American Great Lakes Ports Association, and he's been that executive director since '94. He currently serves on a number of marine industry organizations, including the Great Lakes Commission, the Great Lakes Pilotage Federal Advisory Committee, and the Great Lakes Seaway Partnership. He has served on the Washington staff previous to this role. So he has worked on transportation and appropriations legislation. We also have Mark Wright. He currently serves as the Southern Region Vice President of the American Waterways Operators, the AWO. AWO is a national trade association as well, primarily for the towboat, the tugboat, and the barge industry associations. He currently oversees the relations with the Coast Guard's 8th District and sectors in Mobile, New Orleans, Houston, and Corpus Christi. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that capital investment, the operation maintenance from Mark. And then Mr. Bill Stallman, a great friend of mine, he is currently the construction, and such a great friend that I was like, I don't need his bio, Director of Engineering and Construction for America's Central Port. Bill currently serves as the chair for the Illinois Ports Association. He currently serves on the board of directors for Inland Rivers Ports and Terminals. He serves on numerous committees, including the Ports and Harbors Committee for COPRI, and he serves on the Committee for America's Infrastructure with the ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers. Bill's been awarded numerous awards through ASCE and has been awarded St. Louis's 40 Under 40 in 2017. So with that, Mr. Fisher, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and giving us an overview of the American Great Lakes Ports Association.
Great, thanks, Amy. Can I first confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy, thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you to the Propeller Club for inviting me to participate in this panel today. It's a great honor. I've watched the conference over the last few days and really been impressed with the speakers and the quality of the discussion, and have learned a lot, quite frankly, in the last 2 days. I'd like to take some time today to tell you a little bit about our organization, tell you a little bit about Great Lakes Shipping, and then share with you some of the issues we're working on. Our organization is a public policy advocacy organization, so I'll probably be talking more about public policy challenges that we're confronting, less so commercial challenges, because I'm not a commercial guy. I'm essentially a lobbyist. But our organization was founded in the late 1970s to represent the interests of the public port authorities on the US side of the Great Lakes. We're one of several regional port organizations throughout the United States, and we almost exclusively focus on the unique aspects of Great Lakes shipping that are uncommon to other areas of the United States. Our membership includes 15 public port authorities. Our membership requires our members have to be public agencies, so we are a trade association of local public agencies. And I invite all of you to visit our website to learn more about us and our activities at greatlakesports.org. Just assuming some of you on the line don't necessarily know about Great Lakes shipping, I would like to take a few minutes to talk about the Great Lakes navigation system. If you could switch to the next slide, that'd be great. The first thing to point out, which makes it particularly challenging in the Great Lakes, is that Canada owns half the Great Lakes. So we are not exclusively a US waterway. We have to work closely with our Canadian partners. Canadian government regulations impact our commerce as much as US government regulations do. And we work closely with Canadian maritime trade associations to try to partner with them, to have them work public policy in Ottawa as we work on public policy in Washington. The Great Lakes navigation system handles about 140 million tons of cargo every year. It is a deep draft navigation system. It's primarily a bulk system, a little bit of break bulk, and almost no containerization, a little bit, but not much. 3 vessel operator communities serve the region. We have a decent sized fleet of American vessels operating under the Jones Act. We have a fleet of Canadian flag vessels operating under the Canadian version of the Jones Act, the Coasting Trade Act. And then we have international vessels, ocean-going vessels coming into the Great Lakes through the St. Lawrence Seaway from literally anywhere in the world. Again, generally smaller vessels because the locks on the navigation locks on the St. Lawrence Seaway limit the size of those vessels. The navigation system supports a number of industries in the Midwest, primarily steelmaking, which is critical to the nation's economy, raw materials for steelmaking, and all those various commodities like iron ore, limestone, coal, coke, and so on. Also the energy industry, we still move a good amount of coal on the Great Lakes to power plants around the region. The agricultural sector is a major shipper on the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. And then the construction industry, we move lots of stone and limestone for construction. The system is, a primary attribute of the system is a series of navigation locks, very similar to the inland waterway system on the Great Lakes to go from the Atlantic Ocean all the way west to Duluth, Minnesota, which is the farthest west you can go in the Great Lakes. A vessel passes through 16 navigation locks. Of those locks, excuse me, of those locks, 13 are in Canada. So those locks are the responsibility of the Canadian government, but 3 are in the United States. To make things even more complicated, of the 3, we have 2 different federal agencies that own and operate them. In northern Michigan, we have locks operated by the Army Corps of Engineers. And then there are 2 locks in upstate New York on the St. Lawrence River, which are operated by the US Department of Transportation. And of course, part of our role is to keep in touch with Congress and those federal agencies to make sure those locks are invested in and maintained. Can we go to the next slide? I want to hit some of the issues we're working on. This slide just gives you an idea of some of the many things we're working on right now. I don't want to talk about all of them, nor do we have time to, but I would like to just hit a few to give you a sense of the variety of challenges we're working with. Next slide, please. Like any port anywhere in the United States, we have a close relationship with the Army Corps of Engineers, who's responsible for maintenance of our harbors. We in the Great Lakes are on the same funding system as coastal ports. As you all know, the inland river system has a different funding system with the Corps, but we are on the same system referred to as coastal deep draft navigation, which is the same as the coastal ports. Our funding comes from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and commerce on the Great Lakes is assessed the harbor maintenance tax as it is on the coasts. And consequently, we work with the Corps and we work with Congress to make sure there are adequate funds coming out of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. Just to give you a sense, I think many of you know that for years, Congress was constraining spending from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and that was leading to inadequate maintenance of the nation's harbors. And over the years, we developed quite a backlog in the Great Lakes of work that needs to be done in our harbors and funded in the Corps' operation and maintenance budget. We have almost $1 billion backlog right now in the Great Lakes of work that needs to be done. $375 million of dredging in various Great Lakes harbors around the region. $320 million of breakwater repairs. These are stone structures that are out in the water to protect our waterfronts and port entrances. And then the locks I mentioned that the Corps operates in northern Michigan require almost $225 million of maintenance over the next 5 years to keep them operating. Next slide, please. The source of all this money, as I said, is the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and Congress had been restraining funding from that trust fund. We have worked cooperatively with our sister ports from around the country and AAPA to try to convince Congress to increase appropriations from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund for Corps of Engineers operation and maintenance activity. And you can see since fiscal year 2013, working together, the ports in this country have convinced Congress to double spending from the trust fund. And that has done a lot to open up the funds to take care of our navigation needs and our dredging needs and so on throughout the country. Our philosophy in the Great Lakes is that working in partnership with our sister ports around the country, if we can grow the pie for the whole country, the slice of the pie that goes into the Great Lakes will grow as well. And you can see that in the second column from the right. The amount of money coming into the Great Lakes has grown considerably as the national pie has grown. So it's been a successful strategy, and we look forward to continuing to work with ports all around the country to keep the pressure on Congress and keep the cooperation going so that we can see more and more resources coming out of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to maintain our ports and in the Great Lakes to catch up on this backlog. Next slide, please. As I said, in northern Michigan, the Corps of Engineers operates a set of locks. We've referred to them as the Sioux locks. They're located in a town called Sault Ste. Marie, which is a French name from colonial times. But the locks have existed there for over 100 years. The most recent iteration of these locks, the newest lock, is from the late 1960s. There's a project right now to construct a new lock, and if you look at the photograph, the two lock chambers you see on the right are currently retired. The two on the left are active. The current project is to rip out the two on the right and replace them with a brand new single lock chamber. So at the end of the day, we'll have 3 locks there and some redundancy. The lock that you see the vessel in right now in the photo That lock is much bigger than the adjacent lock, and we'd like to have a redundant separate second large lock in that location. The project is a $1.4 billion project. It is currently under construction, so we've been working closely with Congress to keep construction funds flowing. I'm pleased to note that just in the fiscal year 2022 appropriation bill, there's $480 million for the next chunk of this project, which is fantastic. And that's the amount that President Biden put into the administration budget for this project. So there's been tremendous support for this project from both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, quite frankly, before them. And Congress has stepped forward as well. And so the project, again, 4 years into construction right now, it's probably a 8 to 10 year construction timeline, and things are going well. We're gonna keep working to make sure the funds keep flowing to keep the project on schedule. Next slide, please. Big issue in the Great Lakes is ice breaking. For those of you who don't know or realize, the Great Lakes are not saltwater like the coast, they're freshwater, and freshwater freezes much more easily than saltwater, and it freezes harder. The Great Lakes region is pretty far north, and so the combination of freshwater and harsh winters leaves us with a navigation system that's covered with ice at times. And the Coast Guard is responsible for providing ice breaking services on the Great Lakes, and historically have maintained a fleet of icebreakers on the Great Lakes to keep the shipping lanes open and to keep commerce moving. Unfortunately, since the late 70s, the Coast Guard's fleet of icebreakers have atrophied. We're down to 9 icebreaking vessels from 14. The Coast Guard has unfortunately not been enthusiastic about committing budgetary resources to beefing up their icebreaking fleet on the Great Lakes. That fleet is necessary to keep commerce moving. We've had unfortunate circumstances in past years where commerce has stopped. Deliveries of critical raw materials to steel mills have stopped. Ships have been stuck in the ice. Ships have been sliced open by ice. Mariners have been put in danger by bad ice situations. All that needs to stop, and we need to fix this problem. I want to give a call out to the Lake Carriers Association, which is the American carriers on the Great Lakes, for leading an effort that our group is helping on, and Maritime Labor is helping on, and many others, to try to push forward through Congress new funding for a new heavy icebreaker on the Great Lakes, and then also for enactment of something called the Great Lakes Winter Commerce Act, which would be a law to establish performance metrics for the Coast Guard, so that as they break ice on the Great Lakes, they're actually doing so not based on their budgetary resources, but based on commercial metrics, what the needs of commerce are, not, hey, how much money do we have? And so we're working with Congress. I'm pleased to say that the Great Lakes Winter Shipping Act has been included in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is moving through Congress. And then funding for the new icebreaker, $350 million, has already been included in the budget reconciliation bill that's moving through Congress. I think you all know from watching the media that that bill is a $3.5 trillion bill, and it'll probably take a haircut before it's done. We're working now to try to make sure this project doesn't take a haircut and that it stays in the final package. Next slide, please. As Amy pointed out a few minutes ago,